The top approach to prioritization. Prioritization is often badly done in organizations. Sometimes it's too simplistic, sometimes people have made it too complex. But really, when you boil it down, there are four principal questions you're trying to answer in prioritization. First is this initiative sufficiently strategically relevant? Now, the vast majority of business initiatives, ideas, projects, we'll call them initiatives, will be partly, somewhat strategically relevant. They'll have some association with some part of the strategy. So it's not a question of does it actually align to anything. Align is too weak a word. The question is not only is it strategically relevant, but sufficiently strategically relevant to be invested in. And you need to have a cut-off, as we'll talk about soon. Is it sufficiently worthwhile? Does it have a positive ROI or NPV, and does that meet the hurdle rate? Some projects will not have a positive financial benefit but still be worthwhile because what they're doing is something that's important to the organization. For example, it may be negating a competitive disadvantage. It isn't necessarily going to earn you any more money, but it will enable you to be competitive. So this isn't just financial, it has a wider context. Is it deliverable? Notice the first two have sufficiently in. It's not a case of being sufficiently deliverable. It either is or it isn't. And we give you three criteria on which to evaluate that. The risk level, the capability level required, and the capacity to both deliver and absorb the outcomes. If you can't deliver the project, the initiative, then it's just not worth starting. And finally, when it gets to the approval committee, is it something we want to do now? It may pass all the tests above. It may be relevant, worthwhile, and deliverable, but it's just not something we want to do as an organization. It's just not a priority. So what we've done in the top Prioritization Center of Expertise is give you both the capacity to build the tools you're normally missing, as well as implement them in terms of prioritization. The first thing we do is explain all the different steps, because some of these things like capability assessment is new. Most people have never considered this before. We explain the problems with orthodox prioritization processes and the risk dimensions. I mean, most projects, one would hope, would have some form of risk assessment, but is it comparable? Is it able to generate a profile that you can compare across projects to say this one is higher risk than another? So we first will explain the whole process. Then, in terms of the strategic relevance, this needs to be measured not at the top financial management, market awareness, product inventory management level, but at the strategic imperative level, at the more detailed level. And as you can see here, these strategic imperatives have been weighted from 5 down to 1 and organized under the different strategies and stratagems that they actually contribute to. And what you need each project to do is say, well, which of these does it actually contribute? And on a controlled, normalized basis, how much does it contribute? And what you normally find is that you have a number of contributions in 2, occasionally 3 of the columns. You won't have a contribution to all the strategic imperatives. That's just not possible. So you need each, first of all, to generate the strategic contribution assessment tool for your organization, and every organization's SAT, as we call it, SAT, will be different, and you'll need to update it every sort of couple of years or so. But first you have to generate this and the scoring criteria. So we have on the top right hand side increases profitable sales. Now you would have to set some criteria that says what constitutes a level 1 impact and what constitutes a level 2 and 3 impact. So you might say increases profitable sales by 10 million is up to 10 million is 1, between 10 and 25 is a 2, and above 25 million is a 3. Then every project knows what the scoring mechanism is. So that's part of the process that we provide as the SAT development and implementation. So explain what it is, how to generate it through a workshop, how to test it, how to then implement and use it. We give you all the different steps, and then at the detail level, step-by-step instructions and training, plus the templates and worked examples. Worthiness is determined by the desired business outcomes, benefits, and net value to be delivered. And sometimes the financial side will be overwhelmed by the business side. Sometimes you can't put a meaningful figure in terms of the value of the benefits. You just can articulate exactly what you're trying to achieve, what the benefits of those outcomes are. The financial benefits may not be calculatable on a viable basis. So worthiness is more than just financials. That's the key point we're making, and that's the key point we're enabling. So we equip you with the whole value equation, which is desired business outcomes to identify the resultant business benefits, and then quantify the financial benefits, as well as identifying the outcomes delivery activities. What do you need to do to move from where you are today to the desired business outcomes and benefits, the change activities, which also become part of the project activities. By identifying the change activities, you can use the normal processes to calculate the costs and therefore the net financial value, whether that's ROI, NPV, or whatever your organisation uses. Now, organisations already have bases for calculating the costs of projects. We don't provide that. What we do provide is the area that is normally badly done, which is defining the outcomes, benefits and value, and all the change activities required to deliver that value. If you miss some of the change activities, your costs are going to be understated. If you miss some of the benefits, your value is going to be understated. What the value equation does is maximize the value. So if you're going to spend X dollars, you're going to get the maximum value for those dollars. So we provided the complete value equation module as part of the Prioritization Center of Expertise, and that provides step-by-step instructions and training, as well as templates and worked examples. Deliverability is determined by the levels of risk, capability and capacity. In terms of risk, we're looking here what we call systemic risks. These are risks that are common to each project, and therefore you can have each project assess their risks and you have a comparable basis. Some organizations will already have risk assessment models in place. That's fine, you can use those. For those that don't, we provide 3 types of systemic risks. Risk to the business, that is from the project to the business. Does this project, this initiative, put the customers or the suppliers or the organizational structures at risk? Then there's the actual project delivery risk. What are the risks to the delivery of the project? And then what are the risks to the delivery of the benefits? These are the 3 types of risks we provide that you can then assess. So we go through each one, how to run the workshops, how to generate the profiles, and we give you templates to do that, and detailed step-by-step instructions. Now, capability is something that few organizations consider. Capability is something that you're actually good at, or you need to be good at. If you're a manufacturer, you need to be good at manufacturing. If you're a retailer, you need to be good at retailing. So you need to have a retailing capability. In terms of projects, if you want to get the results and value out of projects, you need to have a high level of value delivery capability. Unfortunately, because this is not an area that people have looked at or managed, most organizations are down at levels 1 or 2, and this both constrains the types of projects that they can do successfully and the returns they're going to get over time. It doesn't constrain what you can start. You can start any starter project. It constrains what you can successfully deliver. If you're going to, someone said, let's go and climb Mount Everest, you can start by going to Nepal and maybe getting to the base camp. But if you're not a mountain climber and if you don't have all the wherewithal to climb, and it's the right season and it's the right weather, you're not going to get there. You're not going to successfully climb the mountain. Similarly with projects, you can start any project, but as the complexity of the project increases and the business and external impacts increase, the organizational capability to deliver it also needs to increase. And what you can see here is the different types of projects that you can have and the required capability levels on the left-hand side. So if you're going to try and improve products and services, you should have a level 3 capability as a minimum. If you don't, and you have a capability level 1, then that project is going to be compromised to some extent. Some may fail, a lot will still deliver something, but it will be a compromised result. You won't get all the benefits, you won't get all the strategic advantages that you set out to achieve. This is the first stage of deliverability. So what we provide you is the capability to just assess both your organization's capability level and each project's required capability level, so you can identify if there's a gap. In this particular example, there was a gap. The organization was currently at level 1.9. It then was planning to move to about 2.6, I think, but the program of work it was undertaking was 4.2. It had a major capability gap. The only thing you could say about that program of work was it was not going to be successfully delivered until, in this particular case, they uplifted the capability level of the organization, which they did, and it was delivered. The second or third is capacity. You'll often run out of capacity before you run out of capital. So you need to verify, do you actually have the people, skills, specialist resources to successfully deliver this initiative? Not only do you have them, but do you have them when they're required and for as long as they're required? So in most organizations, there seems to be about 20 people that everybody wants on their projects. So these are some of the scarce resources. Their allocation needs to be carefully managed. And if you run out of this A team and start allocating the B team, you will get B team results. Who you have on your team determines the results delivered. There is no finite result out there that just needs to be discovered and implemented. The team determines the outputs and the results, and therefore who you have on the team will determine the results you get. If you're putting B and C team people on your projects, you're getting B and C team people determining your future because they will deliver B and C team type results. So at times, as it says at the top, you'll run out of capacity before you run out of capital. You just don't have the quality of resources to successfully deliver your future. And do the staff have the capacity to absorb the planned level of change, not only for this initiative, but in the conjunction with all the other initiatives that are planned or concurrent at the moment? Organizational areas can only take on so much change simultaneously before they explode or implode, depending on how you want to look at it, and they just can't take any more, and resistance to change just goes through the roof. As a CEO once said to me, how well you do change determines how much change you can do, and it's one of the key aspects of doing change well is making sure you don't require or ask too much of your staff simultaneously. And in this capacity to absorb, you need to also take into account major operational events like year end, or maybe if you're a retailer, the whole Christmas New Year period. You don't want to be implementing major change in that time. So this just needs to be managed to make sure that your project is not planning to overload the organization in, say, December in a retailer. If you can't get it in by November, that means you're not going to get it in until February, March. That may change the cost and therefore the returns on investment. Then one vital step. So we've now established that the project is, how relevant it is, how worthwhile it is, and how deliverable it is. But one of the key things that needs to be done is what we call the validation process, because most of the problems that appear downstream in projects are visible at the business case stage if you know where to look. And so what we have here is a complete training and assessment program that should be done independent of the project to say, okay, now we've looked at it as proposed, but is this actually workable? Are they understating the costs? Are they overstating the value? Or are they parking some of the value for another project when in fact we don't need that other project to get this value? Have they got all their assessments right? Have they got the resources right? Have they actually selected the most appropriate solution? As an illustration of the need for this, we trained a whole team in a bank once and then got them to look back at the last 6 projects that had been approved by the investment committee, and they only went to the investment committee if they were over 10 million. And when they apply the validation tests, 5 of those 6 projects should not have been approved for 5 different reasons. One project was obviously a mess. One project was implementing a solution that quite obviously was not actually addressing the problem they said they were trying to solve. Another one we felt could have been solved for maybe 1/10 of the proposed cost, and so on. So these are the sorts of findings you can have with validation. And this is not how to win friends and influence people, I will admit, because this will cause disruption and argument and so on. But it's not a case of being nice to everybody. It's about, if we're going to invest 10, 20, 30, 40 million or whatever the figure is, are we going to get the results? And if there are a bunch of holes and problems with the project today, regardless what the NPV or ROI says, we're not going to get that value, and we want to know now so we can fix those problems or cut the project now because it's never going to deliver the value. So having assessed and prioritized the business case, validated the business case and project, then the only question for the investment committee is this something we want to do now? Is it a priority now? In some cases, you can pass all the preceding tests, be validated as fine, but it's just not something we want to dedicate resources to. It may have a positive ROI, it may be quite bankable in terms of benefits, but we'd rather spend our energies elsewhere. That's the prerogative and decision of the investment committee, and we provide the training to do this, and also what are their decision options, because it's not just go, no go, it's more subtle than that, but also understanding when to reject proposals. There are too many investment committees that don't reject bad proposals for political or other reasons. So there needs to be some basis for saying, no, in these cases, you should not approve this project. You either send it back for more work, or maybe say, nope, this is never going to go ahead. And we also provide some bonus materials to help you adopt and use prioritization. So we have the complete set of tools here to both assess the priority of a project on a comparable basis, validate that, and then approve it or decide not to be approved. It really is That simple.